Welcome to the Industry Angel Podcast. We hear from the best business minds across the globe, entrepreneurs, social influencers, marketing mavens, and sales rock stars. We've got them all. Here comes your weekly dose of inspiration with your host, Ian Farah.
Welcome to episode 150 of the Industry Angel. Is that a milestone? 150. It feels good. It feels good to me anyway. It feels like so long ago we started, but what a journey, eh? And I love your feedback, so keep the messages coming in. I've got a couple here. You guys enjoyed the panel events that we recorded. Thanks to Tom, Cameron and Sean for speaking at those. Alfie Joey got in touch to say he enjoyed the episode that I recorded with Brad Burton. Alfie, there's also an episode I recorded after Newcastle Starter Week with Brad. I caught him outside. That's quite a good one as well. And Alfie's a great artist as well. Check him out, Alfie Joey. You need to draw me an angel, Alfie, okay? There's a quest for you. And actually, in terms of Newcastle Starter Week, I'll be speaking there in May on day one, Inspiration. You know I love that 5-day business festival, so I can't wait to speak there. I've had some great fun speaking lately at conferences. If you know of a conference I should be at, let me know. Let the organisers know. I've also been having some great fun with universities lately, doing some enterprise and business challenges. So we've been having lots of fun. And you know I love to keep the show diverse. So again, today we've got a really diverse speaker for you. Who else we got? May King. She got in touch via Twitter. Really enjoyed the Anne Cleves live show. Remember Anne? She wrote the Vera books. We really need to get Brenda Blessing, don't we? You know who plays Detective Vera Stanhope on the TV show? We need to get her on the show, don't we? So then, let me introduce today's guest for you. Today we have a friend of mine from the Professional Speakers Association, author, mountaineer, the first woman to climb Everest from both sides. Welcome to the Industry Angel, Cathy O'Dowd.
Thanks. It's great to be with you.
Thanks so much, Cathy. It's been a while since I last seen you. It's been months. What have you been up to?
Let's see. So it's winter the mildest winter we've had in ages. I've been doing a lot of ski mountaineering in the Pyrenees Mountains, which is my home turf. And then at the end of last year, I had an amazing climbing trip to South Africa, to the mountains outside of Cape Town. There is the most amazing sun-baked Table Mountain sandstone. It's just such fun to climb. So yeah, great trip.
Well, actually, you might as well tell us where you are right now, Cathy, because you don't spend all your time in one place, do you?
No, I don't. But right now, I am at home. And home, although I'm South African, home is Andorra, this funny little country in the Pyrenees Mountains between Spain and France, completely in the Pyrenees Mountains. So I can go out of my back door and go mountain running, and just down the road is ski mountaineering and rock climbing. And it's just this amazing sunny mountain paradise.
Everyone's really jealous now. We're just imagining this now. So what does your day to day look like then?
Very changeable.
Okay.
Because my work is as a motivational speaker. So I only do a couple of talks a month, but they'll always be in different countries. So I'm leaving shortly at the end of this week for Mexico City to do 2 talks for a big bank. So if I'm not traveling for one of the talks, there's a certain amount of admin that has to be done at home on the computer. I just work in the house, roll out of bed, make breakfast, and there's the laptop, ready and waiting. A certain amount of admin and marketing and logistics and invoicing and trip planning and blah, blah. And then in between that, it's getting out into the mountains. So right now, it's very much ski touring season. So today and tomorrow is work. But on the weekend, and then again on Wednesday, with a friend, we're busy ticking off the highest peaks in Andorra. I mean, we've done them before, but just for fun, we've decided to do all of them. Bam, 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 one behind the other. So Wednesday, we've done 4 so far of the 7 highest. Wednesday we'll get numbers 5 and 6 because we can tag 2 of them in a single tour. So it's a combination of that. It's work, it's stuff at home, and then it's just getting out into the mountains when the weather allows.
You mentioned there about your speaking career. So what is your message, Cathy, before we drill in? I think at the top of the conversation I mentioned about Everest and stuff. So what is your overarching theme from a speaker point of view, and who do you appeal to?
Well, I don't think of myself as a message speaker, or maybe that's just me having a certain perception of that kind of wording, because there are definitely people who tend to believe that they have a message the world needs to hear. I don't think that. I think the world would do okay without me. I think it's better with me in it, but I'm really not, proclaiming. I don't think of myself as the second coming of anything. I just think of myself as having some really interesting stories, and it turns out that there are companies who really enjoy hearing those stories. They find them interesting and useful. So where I ended up in the speaking space, obviously I'm the sort of speaker who's drawing on personal experiences, extreme experiences. So we're talking about my Himalayan expeditions. But even there, I mean, the truth is a well-planned expedition, which just goes according to plan, isn't that interesting, except for the people who were there. For everyone else, it's just like, well, yeah, okay, that sounds like you call it a holiday. It sounds like hard work to me. And that's about it. You had a plan, it worked. There's a reason why all the best-selling books and movies about mountaineering are all disaster stories. Not because that's what normally happens. It's not. But because when we come to stories, we want obstacles and suffering and conflict and teetering on the edge of disaster and then somehow miraculously managing to overcome it, hopefully, and either learn something or achieve something or both. So not every adventure story makes a good kind of case study, particularly when you're talking to corporations who don't want to know how to climb a mountain. They really don't. These aren't even people who chose to individually buy a ticket to come to a lecture about mountain climbing. They're at the company conference because they were told to be there. They've probably got emails they could be answering, You've got a fairly narrow window of tolerance before these guys decide they're thoroughly bored and go back to doing their email on their phones.
Well, I've saw your latest talk, and you don't even pick your phone up during it because it does take you on a real roller coaster of emotion. It's absolutely fantastic. But before we delve into that, though, let's wind it back, Cathy. Let's wind it back to you mentioned you're from South Africa. How did you get involved in your first Everest expedition?
Well, by accident, which is not what anybody expects. They always assume, particularly when someone like me ended up with a minor world record on Everest, that it must have been this goal from the time I was 3 and the first time I saw a picture book of Everest or some such nonsense. It wasn't. I took up rock climbing when I got to university because it was fun. I took up mountaineering because I was curious about what it would be like to try and climb things that were higher and colder and, made of ice rather than made of rock. Then I started trying to get to different places to do mountaineering. I mean, it's not simple, particularly from South Africa. We used to go to the Andes, to Central Africa, got a trip to the Alps. And the next thing I wanted was the Himalaya. I didn't care where, anywhere in the Himalaya. And very few expeditions. This was long before commercial expeditions were a thing. And then the next expedition out of South Africa that came up was the first South African Everest Expedition. And it still wasn't for me. They had a team. They were all men, but they had a team. And then a newspaper, who was one of the sponsors, decided that the whole thing wasn't that interesting, and they'd make the coverage more dramatic by running a competition to find a girl to add to the team. I mean, it really, the whole thing really was fairly sexist and very contrived. One of the headlines was, are you our woman with the balls for the summit? I'm just like,
oh really?
God. And I was a mountaineer. I was like, this is not how you pick people for teams. But I mean, what are you going to do with that kind of poisonous opportunity? Because it's both. It's thoroughly sexist, it's thoroughly patronizing, and it's an opportunity. So you're going to take it or not? And I just thought, stuff it. I recognize all the ways in which I think this is a terrible idea, and I'm going to apply anyway. And yeah, I was the woman who ended up being selected to join the team.
Yeah, and when was that?
This was back in 1996, a very long time ago now.
So, Cathy, had you pushed yourself to that extreme beforehand?
The honest answer was I didn't know. Because it's when you push yourself in extreme circumstances, you don't really know how that rates against something else until you try something else. You know, a lot of it you understand only with hindsight. So I'd done some pushy mountaineering, but I'd certainly never been above, I think, 6,000 meters. You know, Everest is 8,850 meters, so that's quite a big jump in altitude. So I just had no idea. But I think that's important. People assume you don't leave the house unless you're confident that you're going to crush the goal. And that makes no sense to me, because how do you know? If you're picking a goal that's really ambitious, surely you don't know yet whether you're actually capable. That's what you're going to find out by trying. And the other important thing, I think, is that you don't have to be good enough when you walk out of the front door. You just need to be good enough to start, and you need to know how to learn. And learn quickly, learn on your feet, learn while you're doing. And with that mindset, that I'm actually in it for the process, for the experience, I'm in it to learn, and I'm able to learn on my feet and be adaptable, I'll see how far I can get. And I went to Everest with that attitude. I never assumed I was going to get to the top. But I just assumed that I was going to come home having had an amazing experience and having learned a whole bunch of stuff, which I did, including learning that I was good enough to get to the summit of Everest.
You won that competition. What did the next steps look like? Did they say, okay, you're going to have to do a certain training regime, you're going to have to show us that you can do a certain amount of capability?
No, not really. And there are two sides to that. The one a bit spurious, the other not. So very briefly, all these women applied. They came up with a short list of 6. We went and climbed Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain in Africa, which is not a technical mountain. So this wasn't a test of climbing skill. It was more a test of compatibility and of kind of mental and emotional approach to the project. Because one of the things about mountaineering is, or at least when I started, you learned via apprenticeship. You didn't do a set of commercial training courses or something. You went with people who were better than you. And you learned from them, and it was highly likely that the weaker or less experienced people would have to stop at some point, and the stronger climbers would finish the climb, and then you'd all meet up back at base camp or whatever it is. Yeah, the various ways of doing that. So the newspaper was simply looking for a way of sexing up the coverage of this expedition. So they really didn't care whether the woman got to the top or not. They just wanted, headlines. The leader of the team was on board with taking somebody as effectively an apprentice. And nobody thought that the woman who got brought in at the last minute was actually going to be, part of the team that eventually tried to get to the top. But there's a great deal to be learned just by being part of the project. So both he and I kind of went into the project with that approach. That being said, some of the other men on the team who had been selected as being South Africa's best, South Africa not being a great mountaineering nation, so South Africa's best weren't necessarily world class. They weren't particularly glad of this whole process, partly because I got a lot more media coverage, which I didn't want either, but it was the nature of the weird way I joined the team. But it did mean I walked onto the team as with token woman stamped on my forehead, and a good deal of ego-driven resentment from some of the other members of the team. So it was all complicated.
How many was in the team?
We started out, that's not where we ended up, we started out with 8 climbers coming from South Africa, although one of them was actually British. He was the photographer, and 4 climbing Sherpas joining the team.
So you alluded to something there, Cathy.
Well, not everyone got to base camp. The team was dysfunctional almost from the first day we
Right.
got together. And 3 members walked out before we even got to base camp. Oh, this is an incredibly complicated story, but essentially it was a failed power play.
Right. Okay.
And although at the time all of this was incredibly traumatic and very unexpected, because most climbers are just like, hey, we love the mountains, let's go and have some fun together. But then most climbing trips don't have budgets of several $100,000 and 30 corporate sponsors and national media coverage. I mean, none of us were in any sense prepared for all of that side of this. We were climbers.
Sure.
But what did come out of all of this and the sort of the challenges we faced in actually climbing Everest, including running into a very famous storm, it made a good story. That thing I said in the beginning about the stories being the ones that are about disaster and conflict, I came home with hours worth of disaster and conflict, experience, and was able to later on turn that into a really interesting story about team dynamics and why teams of what ought to be professional, intelligent adults who share a passion can utterly fail to gel as a group and can essentially almost crash the project, not because the goal is too difficult, but because the team is in conflict.
That's a really interesting lesson. And so before you even got to base camp, so what? You flew into Lukla and trekked together, and you lost 3 on the way, or?
Yes, basically. Trust me, we're not going to get through it in a 30-minute podcast.
Well, that's really interesting because work is pretty similar, though, isn't it? You sometimes you join a company, and you might be sitting next to somebody or across the way from somebody, and you might not be friends, and you might not get on with them well, but as part of the project, you need to make that work. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you have to be friends. People sometimes assume we come back from the mountains with a lifelong friendship. Sometimes they come back from the mountains and think, my God, I'm so glad I don't have to spend another minute with this guy. Certainly not another week stuck in a tent in a storm. But that doesn't mean I don't respect them and I wouldn't climb with them again. I may not want to I may not want to go to a bar with them or spend a weekend at the beach with them. But they're colleagues and you need to respect each other. So it really starts to fall apart where you start getting power games going on within the team and pecking orders and undermining and, we had all of it. I think that's one of the reasons it makes a good story, because 6 stories that are 100% success, you listen to it as an audience member and you go like, oh, that just feels unrealistic. My life is a constant process of trying to dodge failure and trying to cover up for mistakes and trying to, compensate for my weaknesses and the weaknesses of my team and the weaknesses of my company. And so a story that looks at failure head on and then possibly at ways that you might recognize it, circumvent it, ameliorate it, and overcome it, that starts to be an interesting story.
Let's get into the meat of it then. So you did that first Everest expedition. Was that north or south?
That was south. That was the classic route that, Hillary and Tenzing Norgay climbed.
And then you mentioned quite a famous storm. Was that when you did it from the second time, or was that the first time?
No, that was the first time. The first time was a baptism of fire for Himalayan climbing. It's actually interesting, whatever we are, 25 years later, to look at why that storm was such a thing. Because it's not as if it was the worst storm that's ever happened in the Himalaya. It was not great, but it wasn't terrible. But a couple of things happened. It was the first year that there were multiple teams on the same route, including the very earliest commercial teams. So my team was still the old-fashioned kind of private national expedition. But we were just beginning to have these teams led by professional guides, where the individual team members had simply paid a sum of money and joined a group of strangers. Just like going on a packaged tourism experience. So that was brand new. It was also, I think, the first year that anybody ever ran websites from base camp. We were only about 2 years into the internet. So this was the first time that websites were being run from base camp. So it was the first time you could follow Everest expeditions live. Not quite as live as now, where people, kind of have a satellite telephone in their pocket. But nevertheless, you could more or less get updates every couple of hours about what was happening. And that had never happened before. So this storm struck. These two commercial teams were caught in it. So we've got two famous names in worldwide mountaineering are caught in it. And for the first time, news media can get hold of people at base camp on satellite phones and can follow updates on websites. And the result was Everest kind of went viral in world media for the first time. And people talk about that storm still. There was a best-selling book that came out of it, and there have been multiple movies. There was a Hollywood film a couple of years ago. So, it kind of exists in the zeitgeist of mountaineering history. And they talk about it as a moment when Everest was so crowded, and part of the problem was there was this queue of paying clients on the knife edge ridge to the summit, and they were too slow and they got caught in the storm. But the irony is that best-selling book and all the other media buzz brought commercial climbing to the attention of the world. It didn't put people off. It made them aware that they could do it. And now, 20 years later, Everest is 10 times as crowded. There are many more commercial expeditions. There are hundreds more commercial clients on the mountain. Everest in 2020 is far more crowded than it was back then. And the industry has grown, in a sense, off the back of that disaster. It's really weird.
So why, after that, did you want to go to the north? Did you want to push yourself again? Had it just because it hadn't been done?
No, I didn't even want to climb Everest again. I mean, I got to the top. Why chance your luck a second time? Mm-hmm. I wanted, at that time, to climb K2, second highest in the world. I never have got to K2. But back then, I knew I didn't have enough experience. K2 is a whole different beast from Everest. So along with the leader of that first Everest team, we were trying to come up with a project that would help us gain more experience with an eye to K2 eventually. And we couldn't raise the money. You're trying to raise corporate sponsorship. And you talk about, Kangshung or Makalu or whatever, and people are just like, what? Never heard of it. But Everest, it turned out we could raise the money to go back to Everest. It's like, So how do you make that work? And actually, this is kind of the truth of trying to fund passion projects. You've got to be pragmatic. You've got to take that thing you really want to do, and you've got to take what the market will pay for, and then you look for some kind of overlap. It needs to overlap. You can't do something just because somebody will give you money for it. Not if your heart's not in it. It's no good being utterly passionate about something and nobody else cares about it, because then how are you going to pay for it? So the truth was, we could fund an Everest trip. So it's like, okay, Everest is a very big mountain. If we go to the other side, different country, different weather system, different geology, the only place the two routes meet is literally on the 5 square meters of the summit.
Wow, really?
Yeah, really. You don't even get the same view until you get to the summit, because you really are on the other side of a ginormous mountain. So as climbers, we effectively got a new mountain that met the criteria for gaining experience at high altitude. And the sponsors got Everest. So we went back to Everest.
In terms of Everest trip, then, how did you feel about the comparison between the two?
Well, it was interesting. On a practical level, it is relatively different climbing and geology. So it was really interesting. They each of them have their own kind of beauty, and it's quite different. The south side, you're in this huge valley called the Western Coombe, and it's astonishing because you're at the bottom with these huge mountains all around you. On the north side, you end up high on the north face, and it's just this huge place that looks out across the plateau of Tibet. So it's very different. You've got this incredible sense of height and exposure. On a mental level, it was also interesting because I went into that first one not expecting to get anywhere near the top and succeeded. I went into the second one with much more confidence that we had a very good chance of getting to the top. It was a smaller team. There was much less drama, almost none. And so it was a nice, tight, efficient expedition. And we failed. But we failed because we got caught up in somebody else's tragedy. And that's the sort of thing you can't predict. No matter how well you plan, there are things that happen that are entirely out of your control. And when they happen, you're just going to have to attempt to adapt and deal.
Was that on the north side you said there you failed?
Yeah. The first time. I went back the second time.
Oh, right. Okay.
That's why.
Wowzers. Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so failed the first time. We ran into an American woman who was dying very, very high on the mountain. Tried to help, failed to save her life, and then had to get ourselves off the mountain. So, yeah, that's another long story. But then, we were so close to the summit, and it is a magnificent climb. So clearly, we did need to go back and finish it. So we went back a year later on an incredibly tight budget and had an amazingly efficient expedition and just nipped up the mountain, got to the summit, perfect weather, and got back down.
How long did that one take?
It was remarkably quick. I think we were 5 weeks sort of South Africa to South Africa.
Wow.
We chose to come in quite late because we had quite a lot of experience by then with Everest weather windows and how the season works out and so on, and with acclimatization and so on. So we were, once again, we were the last team that season to reach the summit, which is nice. Both times I stood on the summit of Everest, we were the only team high on the mountain. I've never been in one of those queues on Everest.
Yeah.
I've always had the real classic mountaineering experience where it's just us.
Yeah, I've saw the picture you do in your talks where there's like a queue to get up, and it just looks insane now.
That's very modern. That's kind of developed in the last decade, but it is literally that queue is getting longer and longer by the year.
Yeah. But what happens when you get to the top? Well, you've got that big queue. A weather storm could be coming in, and everyone's in the top, but you can only get so many people down in a hurry. What happens?
Well, that hasn't really happened because what we have now is much, much better weather forecasting.
Okay.
I mean, it's when you're so used to just picking up your phone and having a quick look at the 5-day forecasts now are really good and the 10-day ones aren't bad. It wasn't like that 25 years ago. We didn't have access to the information, and then the forecasting wasn't nearly as good. No, the weather forecasting is one of the miracles of the modern world, and most people don't appreciate that and GPS navigation.
So you mentioned K2 and how you had an interest to do that, but you did have another interest. There was something else on your radar that you wanted to do. Can we delve into that?
Sure. Again, I've never actually done terribly well with having something kind of on the radar, as you said. That seldom actually worked out. So I never did get to K2 in the end. I've always felt as if it doesn't work for me to set 5-year goals and 20-year goals. It works for me to have a sense of what I want in life, what interests me, and then to be flexible about opportunity. So some of the best things that have ever happened have been because there was an opportunity and I was in a position to recognize it, seize it, and then work hard to make the most of it. So the most desperate, difficult expedition I ever did was to be part of a team that was trying to climb a new route on an 8,000-meter peak. So the mountain was Nanga Parbat. So that's in Pakistan. I think it's number 9 in the world. It's one of the 8,000ers. The route was the Mazeno Ridge. It had been tried, but no one had ever managed to complete the thing. It was insanely long. It's this ridge about 5 miles long that sits at 7,000 meters high.
Wow.
So you're climbing along at 7,000 meters over all these small mountain tops, and you're having to camp at that height. And we were doing it alpine style, so no fixed ropes, no fixed camps, no going up and down. You pack a rucksack and you start climbing. And when your rucksack is empty in terms of food and gas, there's no more food, there's no more water. So you're on a ticking clock. And we went up on a 10-day plan, 10 days of food and gas. And the plan was hopelessly optimistic. And we made our first summit bid on day 11. Remembering you've still got to get down. And because the ridge is so long, you don't go back the way you came. You go down a route you haven't seen. You're doing a traverse. So we're trying to get to the summit on day 11. We still need at least 2 days to get back down. So, we've run out of food by now. We've still got some gas. And we fail with the summit bid. We get it wrong. And at that point, 4 of us of the team of 6, myself included, decided to go down because it had got so dangerous, so committing.
Before the summit, Cathy?
Of course.
Yeah.
You have 2 goals when you go mountaineering. Get to the top and come
survive
home alive.
Yeah.
And you may not be able to have both. If you can't have both, which one are you going to choose? Because when people assume like, oh, how could you possibly turn back? Because coming home alive? Because I want to live to climb the next mountain? Because I've got other stuff to do besides climb this one particular mountain? No, giving up mountaineering is a skill. The kind of person who says summit or bust is going to get themselves killed. And they'll probably get you killed, trying to help them. So no. A good mountaineer is one who absolutely has turning back as a possibility at all times. And it's difficult. It's difficult to know when you want to turn back because you're just tired and demotivated and, you're just not digging deep. And when you feel like turning back because the whole situation has just become insanely risky. And if you don't turn back now, you aren't going to get down. Because it's not like running a marathon. Giving up doesn't mean you sit down at the side of the road, pull out your mobile phone and call a taxi. Giving up on a mountain means you've still got to climb all the way back down the mountain. You've got to give up while you've got quite a lot of energy in your tank still. And that's hard to judge.
So in terms of judging then, you give yourself 10 days. So I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 to get up and a couple to get back down again. But it took, did he say 11 before some of the team reached the summit?
No. It took 11 before we made our first attempt to reach the summit, all of us.
Cathy.
The thing about food is, we eat too much. We don't need to eat 3 times a day. We don't need to eat, whatever it is, 2,500 calories a day. We can run on a calorie deficit for days. Weeks, really, although you'll have less and less energy. And we can go without eating for quite some time. Going without drinking is a bit more serious, but we still had gas left. No, day 11, the whole team makes the first summit bid. So we're slow. A couple of things went wrong. We fail on the first summit bid, and at that point, 4 of us decide to go down. It takes us another 2 days to get down. So whatever, that was a 13-day cycle for me, I think. And then 2 of the team, who are insanely good climbers and also completely mad, or certainly prepared to take a level of risk that I'm not prepared to take. And, we're already talking about quite a lot of risk. They kept trying. They got to the summit, I think, on day 14, and they got back to the bottom day 18.
Wow.
That's an epic story of survival.
When you were traversing back down then, was it a surprise how the terrain was and how the climb down was?
Oh, yes, because we got that wrong too.
Yeah.
We were going straight down a known route, the Shell route. But the fact that a route has been climbed before doesn't mean that, it's not a road. It doesn't come with road signs and pavements and, it just means somebody once climbed this snowy mountainside. So we had a rough idea, basically follow this ridge line down to 6,000 meters and then hang a left and, drop off the side and get down to the valley. That's about the directions. And the mist came in. And we missed the turnoff at 6,000 meters. We dropped too low and we got forced down the wrong side of the ridgeline into a bowl that no one has ever climbed in because people are too sensible. And so we were now trapped in a huge avalanche bowl. And that was interesting.
Is this again with no ropes?
We had ropes, but ropes aren't some magical, get out of jail card. So at this point, we'd actually had to use the ropes to abseil down into this bowl.
Really?
And now we're trying to traverse down the bowl, which is threatened by seracs, hanging cliffs of ice, which can break on a completely random schedule. And if they break, they will trigger an avalanche. So, it may not happen, but it might.
Yeah.
And then my climbing partner, and we were roped together, but we were both moving at the same time. He slipped, fell, and broke his ankle before the rope caught him. So, having the rope doesn't, stop you potentially getting injured. And he and I ended up having to put a camp in this avalanche bowl. Fortunately, we found an overhanging prow of rock, and we put our tiny tent right in under the prow of rock. Because all of this, we'd been climbing for 12 hours. It was dark. We were making mistakes. We were so tired. So we decided it was safer to camp than to try and keep climbing in the dark, given the state of his ankle. We knew something was wrong. We didn't know how wrong or not it was. And 5 o'clock the next morning, the bowl avalanched.
Did it? Cathy, man.
It was pretty cool because the other two had got out of the bowl.
Right.
And so they were down on the glacier and they knew we'd camped in the bowl. So they were waiting for us. And they saw the avalanche come down. Now, we didn't see it because we were in the tent, but we heard it. And there's nothing you can do about it. You're in your sleeping bag, and you're in your thermal underwear and your socks. You can't outrun an avalanche under any circumstances anyway. So we heard it, and then effectively it surfed over our heads because we were under this prow of rock. So the tent kind of filled up with spindrift, and then it was gone. So we rolled over and went back to sleep.
Wow.
And the other two thought we'd been swept away and spent a couple of hours sitting in the glacier having hysterics about the fact we must both be dead. And then we emerged from the tent and started to climb back down the mountain. They were pretty pissed at that point because they were so stressed about it. And poor Lakpa with his broken ankle. The climbing boots are incredibly rigid, and it would have been so difficult to get in a rescue to where he was. It would have taken days.
Yeah.
So it's easier just to wedge up the boot. It's almost like a cast. And just limp on down the mountain.
So you left two up. You left two up there to try to.
We left two up there. To try it again. And they got it, but only just. Rick had to have a couple of toes amputated because of frostbite. Afterwards. But it was an amazing piece of climbing by the two of them.
And then didn't they win an award to the team?
Yes, they Rick and Sandy, the two who got to the top, won a thing called the Pierlet d'Or, the Golden Ice Axe. It's kind of like winning an Oscar for alpine mountaineering.
Sure. Wow. And do you actually get it? You get it, Cathy? It's on his wall, yeah?
Well, no, you get a plaque with a picture of a golden ice axe.
Oh, I want an axe.
You don't actually get given like an 18-carat golden ice axe that you could go and melt down.
Well, you could just spray it, you know what I mean?
Well, you could.
Well, I mean, that's an achievement in itself. So when was that?
That was 2012.
2012, okay then. So if anyone's lucky enough to see your talk, Cathy, you talk us through that in detail, yeah?
Yes. So with my corporate clients, I don't really talk about Everest that much anymore. But I often use that trip, the Nanga Parbat trip, partly because it had some really a kind of acute decision-making moments. This is the choice. This is the information. It's not enough information. Deal with it. And you've got to make a choice. You don't know which choice is right. And essentially, you then just have to manage the consequences of your choice, and it leads you into the next set of problems. And so what I do, I use it as a kind of a case study about pioneering and innovation and about project management. But I also actually get the audience to vote the choices. So we use polling software so that on their phones, they get presented with the choice. We can do A or we can do B. This is what we know. What should we do? And it's really interesting because instead of just listening passively, now they've got skin in the game. They've actually committed to one or other of the choices, and now they want to know if they were right or not. Because the choice that he makes isn't always the right choice. And sometimes we just don't know if the other choice would have been any better, but our choice wasn't great. So it's a really interesting exercise in decision making. So that's a really interesting way of doing kind of a motivational presentation with corporate clients. But I do have this spring a set of public talks. I very seldom do public talks, but I'm doing a tour of the UK put on by Speakers from the Edge, 13 venues across Scotland and England. And that'll be kind of an evening. The first half will be largely the Everest years, those stories from early Everest. And then the second half is probably going to be mostly the story of the Mizeno Ridge of Nanga Parbat.
You're coming near me, actually. You're coming to Gateshead.
I am coming to Gateshead, yes. It's on the itinerary.
I'm going to try and catch you. I think you're in May. Maybe May? Is it May? Or?
I know the tour runs 27th of April to the 13th of May.
Yeah, excellent stuff. So are you literally like every couple of days you're doing one?
I think it's 13 evenings in the space of about 16 days. So it's going to be quite demanding.
You have to take some throat lockets and lozenges, I think. My word. Well, Cathy, you've also got a book out though as well, yeah?
Yes, I wrote a book about the Everest years. Mm-hmm. So there was actually a fourth Everest expedition for complicated reasons, but we tried to climb a new route on the Kangshung face of Everest and failed completely. But if anybody wants the real old-fashioned Everest experience, there are at least two routes that have never been climbed. They're both on the east side. You'll be the only team there. You can be as remote and lonely and committed as you like. You know, you don't have to be on the queue in Everest. You can go and do the old-fashioned pioneering thing on the world's highest mountain. So anyway, the book is called Just for the Love of It, partly because I wanted to convey the fact that most mountaineers do it because we like it.
Yeah.
Even when things go wrong, that's kind of part of the challenge, is trying to anticipate and manage and deal with and get ourselves safely out of difficult situations. So yeah, just for the love of it. And that's the story of my 4 expeditions to Everest.
Amazon, can we grab it there? Where else can we get it?
Yes, that's the big place.
Is it? What's your website? Cathy O'Dowd.
The website is kathyoodowd.com, but for the book, it'll just send you back to Amazon.
Right, okay, cool. We'll link up everyone in the show notes. If I wanted to join the queue, how much do I need to do Everest?
That's like buying a car. Do you want a Fiat Panda or do you want a Lamborghini? So if you want a Lamborghini, 2020, the most expensive expedition is $130,000 a head.
Right.
But you don't have to pay anything like that. If you're actually, a reasonably competent climber, so you have some experience, you aren't just somebody who's going to have to be escorted up the mountain with a guide and 3 Sherpas and with no idea what you're doing. If you actually have experience as a climber, you can probably get a commercial place on Everest for about $25,000. But honestly, if you're prepared to do it yourself, not go with a guide, it can be cheaper than that.
Right.
But then you need all the experience. So
it's gone from a Fiat Panda to a push bike now. No, I think I might go for the Lambo option.
Well, be careful with the Lambo people. They'll take your money, but it still doesn't guarantee they'll get you to the top.
That's a good point. Well, Cathy, thanks so much for your time. I'll be linking everything up in the show notes. So if people wanted to come along in the UK and catch you on one of your dates, that would be amazing. And hope to catch you at Gateshead.
That sounds great. If anybody wants to kind of follow the day-by-day adventures, Instagram at Cathy O'Dowd. That's the place. Otherwise, I'd love to see any and all of you on the UK tour. So please come up and introduce yourselves.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for your time, Cathy.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks to Cathy, I took so much away from that. How cool is Cathy? But the main thing for me was that she didn't set out to get to the top of Everest that first time. She just set off. And if you've heard me speak, or if you're a regular listener, you'll know that's my message as well. Just like Nike say, just do it. Get it done. Start. You never know where the journey will take you. That's the exciting bit, not the end. I also took away that Cathy knew when to walk away from a project, when enough was enough, not when you're fatigued or maybe not enjoying it, when the time was right. I love that. I really took a lesson away from that. And actually, if Cathy's visiting a venue near you, remember the UK tour, check out the show notes for the dates. I thoroughly recommend going along. I've watched the story unfold. You get to be a part of it. You get to be a part of that Nanga Parbat expedition. Can I actually say expedition? Well done, Ian. And you get to be a part of it. You can kind of vote online with the software. It's great stuff. She is such a great speaker. So get along and see Cathy. Keep in touch. Let me know how things are going. Let me know if you enjoyed this show. So until next time, I'm Ian Farah. This is the Industry Angel, and thanks for listening.